That's okay. We're going to get things rolling. Todd, how are we doing today?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing great. First off, we want to thank you for coming on board because, what we try to do every single Monday is bring value to all of our agents that are taking part in these Grow Global Masterminds. And so today I'm ecstatic because I love new construction. I love development. I hear you are an amazing expert at it. So I can't wait to have this conversation with you. And two, these topics are chosen because you all as agents and brokers across the country are requesting it. And so this is one of those that was requested that we do more about new construction and development. So welcome, Todd. Thank you so much for coming on here today.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to sharing the knowledge I have.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with that. Let's start with who you are and where you're located and how you got into all this.
So I'm located just north of Atlanta. What's about an hour, Forsyth County, Lake Lanier area, Cumming, Georgia. I'm just on the edge of Forsyth and Dawson County. So born and raised here. It's always been a kind of a hot area due to the schools are really good. Probably the first factor. Taxes are low. Seniors get a tax break at 65 and pay a substantial less because they don't pay the school tax. Then we got Lake Lanier, which is just a lot of lakefront, any waterfront property probably across the U.S. have seen major appreciation. So we've built a few lake homes and kind of really got into real estate in 2000 and full time in 2014 after leaving a corporate America job for 13 years. But I saw my dad, who was a family attorney. I saw him work really hard and do really well, but I also took note that he always made a little bit more money doing real estate. So he had a car wash, he had a mini warehouse, he had a working farm where he had 4 rental properties. He had a baseball field out there. And I said, well, I don't know if I want to take on being an attorney and take all the problems of other people and try to solve them, although it would be fun, but also it's hard work. And I'm not a suit and tie guy. I didn't want to have to go in the courtroom. And part of that is fun, but I sat there and watched the area we're in. I saw another broker, the first broker I held my license with. He's a small guy, and he owned about 250 rental properties. And actually, the one I'm sitting in right now that I bought and fixed up and is actually under contract and closes this month was one of the ones he built. His name is Rex, but he's become very successful. And I kind of saw his model and just duplicated it. So I do
Nice.
a little bit of everything when it comes to real estate. But that's, I've got a family of 3 boys, and I'm married. My wife's a retired teacher. She just got her license. So she's going to jump in and help me a little bit because we're having a hard time keeping up. It's just building's a lot of fun, but there's so many more regulations than there was 10 years ago when I started.
Well, let's talk about that because, building is a lot of fun, but everything it seems there's so much that has changed with it. One, let's talk about cost. I
Yeah.
mean, just hard costs of what it takes to construct a home these days versus 5 years ago.
Yeah. So my first one we built we started in 15, we sold it in 16. It was a 1,400 square feet, just shy of that ranch on about an acre. That little house sold for about 185 when I sold it in 16. It cost, and that was where we had to bring in and build up the foundation because it was either going to be a crawl space or a slab. But to get to a slab, we had to bring in about 70 loads of dirt. Dirt today is a couple $100 a load. Back then it was about 65 a load. So it wasn't that expensive, but I had about $77, 76, $77 per square foot in a ranch home. That same product today would be 135. It's not quite doubled. And that's my cost, but it's close. So when I say cost, that's not the cost of the land. That's going to be the cost of sticks and bricks, and the permitting, buying your water meter, buying your permit. Now in our county, and it's very common in fast growing counties where the schools and roads are overcrowded to have an impact fee. So when we first started, that impact fee was like 3,200. Now we're up to 4,600. So before you can even pull a piece of equipment on site, you're spending roughly probably 10 to 12 grand in permit fees between the purchase of your septic permit, your building permit, your impact fee permit, your water meter is about $3,500. So I'm going to throw that in as well. And then you got surveying cost and all that. So when you see the prices of homes going up in my area, at least, and this is very comparable to Dawson County and in Alpharetta, Fulton County, Atlanta is going to be even higher. But that's a big reason, not only due to, supplies and inflation, but just the government entities are driving up the cost of the permits.
It's so true, and you're speaking a lot about Georgia because that's where you're familiar with. But it's like that in Kentucky, it's like that in Indiana, it's like that in Ohio. So I think it's just across the
Yeah.
board. Government has really gotten in the way, and those fees are just astronomical. Todd, let's talk about, we've got a ton of top talent realtors on here today, and they want to really learn more about new construction and development. At what because I get this question all the time, being in the building industry, where I'll get an agent that'll call me up and they'll say, Stephanie, I've got clients that would love to build in your community called da da da. And I see the lots are 225,000. Can you get a house built for 600? And I'm like, come on now.
Yeah.
Come on now. Let's talk through what on our side of the equation, we get that, but let's share that knowledge with everybody on this call today
Yes.
about what cost versus
Yeah.
what all-in cost would
Yeah,
be.
and I'll back up real quick because I own a company called Hoff Homes. I carry full general liability, full workers comp, and it's a pain to do that. But I've come from a family of attorneys, and we've been sued before, and it's just you got to cover yourself. So
Yeah.
if you get in build just maybe one a year, but if you're doing 10 to 15 like we do, you've got to have that coverage. So I don't have a GC license, my father-in-law does, but I've hired a general contractor that I partner with, and we kind of tag team it. So I probably should have said that up front, but it's no different. We'll go out and buy a lot, and then I'll construct it, then I'll sell the house. So I get the call all the time, just like you said, hey, I've got this lot, I'm looking at it. Could you build me a house? What would it cost to do that? The lot's $100,000 and I want to be in it for 400, but I want to build a 3,500 square foot home. And I just take a step back and have to educate them, because right now to build a basic home on a slab, you're looking minimum about 130 a foot. And that's going to give you vinyl siding, 125 to 130. That's going to give you, if a garage is probably a single car, double car garage. These houses we build are 1,500 square foot and smaller. If you get into like a semi-custom home where you're going to want, 9-inch floors or true real hardwoods, quartz countertops, backsplash, custom vent hood. I'm just finishing up a lake house on a basement for my personal self, and I'm about 190 a cost. So that just shows you. So a lot of these builders, that when they're going to quote you, they're going to either do a cost plus model, because if you were to back in, let's just say 3,500 square foot on a slab, and let's say your cost is 140, but then you got to tack on the builder's fee on top of that, you're quickly over 500,000. So I think it's, knowing those numbers, but sitting down, there's multiple building options. You can hire a true custom turnkey guy. We've got some guys in town that'll kind of let you tag team it and just charge a flat fee. But then you got to get involved and do a lot of the heavy lifting. So it becomes a lot of work. It's very stressful. So a lot of folks that are building would rather have that builder, but they just truly don't understand the cost. And a lot of it's just, not even counting all the permitting and everything, but just the cost of materials. Like we first started plumbing houses, we could get one done for about $7,000. Now we're about 16. Everything is almost doubled.
Yeah, it absolutely has. And going back to that cost per square foot, that's like it's like what everybody was trained. Maybe back in the day it held true, but anymore, a builder will never quote you what the price per square foot is. I get those calls on the daily that says, what are you building price per square foot? Guys, I've got one closing later today that's $638 a square foot. All right. I've got one closing later this week. It's $428 a square foot. And so it really depends on, especially when you get up into more of the customization or semi-customization that we're talking about here. No bill, if a builder gives you that, it's fake. Don't you agree, Todd?
Oh, absolutely. Because you may say, oh, I want these windows. You get the price, and a week later, those windows are 3 months out.
Yeah.
People that when we're doing I say semi-custom, I've built houses that are $1 million on Lake Lanier, but a lot of them that I'm building are those 300 to 400 bread and butter, just your kind of your starter home. Because when I started this model, I said, I got a not a short memory. I remember what happened in 07, 08. I've got personal friends whose builders went out of business and they got completely out of the game. So I said, if we get stuck and go through another downturn, I want the ability to either hold those as rental portfolio, or if I've got to sell them, it's a much easier sell to sell a 350, 1,500 square foot home than to have a 8,000 square foot mansion. But no, that's exactly right. It's if they quote you something, you need to get that in writing. A lot of times it's going to be, it's going to be tough to do that, especially with the way things were hard to get materials from, there for a while, we couldn't even get plywood, and we were getting it was $40 a sheet. So some builders were going back to the foam board and putting that in on as a siding option instead of the true plywood, which they did that a lot in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. So, Todd, when you're looking at, what is your formula to what you pay for a lot versus what the total house price is going to be?
Yeah, when we first started, my rule of thumb, because when I started this, I got into fixing and flipping. Like the house I'm sitting in right now, I'll throw real numbers at you. I'm not going to make much money on the flip. There's another play in this factor. I needed a house in this school district until my lake house got built, so I had to quickly buy an estate sale. And we bought this for 230. I put about 60 in it, and we got it under contract at 320 with another EXP agent representing the VA loan. And I threw in a little bit of extras because we threw in an extra AC. Once I get it under contract, I don't want to start over on these smaller ones. I just want to get it to the closing table. But yeah, back to your question, the model is actually, the profits have gotten better since COVID. When we first started this, you'd look, okay, so if you paid 30 grand for a lot, ideally you wanted to make about a 20% return by the time you paid your builder, by the time you had your construction loan, and you paid your, I kept my 3% because I can build and list. So I didn't have this total of 6, but I've always done 3% for every buyer's agent that brings a buyer. I haven't changed yet. Some builders have dropped it to 2.5. We've not gone that route yet because it was so hard to get houses sold, and these agents are doing a good job. But in general, rule of thumb, 20%. So if you had a 1,000 square foot home and it cost you 125 a foot, by the time you sold it, you would want to make, I don't have a calculator on me, but 30, 40 grand off that house. Those numbers have gone up in this area just because of supply and demand. A lot of investors have scooped up stuff, and there's not a lot of entry level homes. There's no big builder and it's probably very similar for you. There's not a big builder in Forsyth County that'll build anything under 550. That's
Yeah.
a starting price, unless you get into a townhome, and even those are going to be pushing probably high fours.
They are, and that's what's crazy about it. 6, 7 years ago, a good townhome, which could have been either starter or, maybe somebody wanting to downsize, all day long in the high twos, maybe 3.25 at the most. That was more luxury side of things. Those same ones today are in the $500,000 range. And so, when they talk about there is over 4 million shortages, 4 million homes short of what the demand is in the current market today, we can't, it's hard to find that builder that can build anything. And I think a lot of that, until you get into those higher price points, you can't make any money.
Yeah. And that's like across from I live on a little farm right on the county line. We've got a couple acres, but across from us, it's all rural, but it's working its way. Pulte developer got sewer to it, and they just start daisy chaining. Once they get sewer on one road, it's just a matter of time. They daisy chain it down. I'm in development, but they've got 72 houses going on about 36 acres. And Pulte Homes, when they first started, you could get in them at the low fives. When I talked to the agent 2 weeks ago, she said, by the time you do the upgrades, minimum you're going to be mid 550s, and most people are in the 560 to 570 range. And that's their smallest house, 2,250 square feet. Pretty much like a 45 by 45 box with a shed roof coming off the back. I mean, they're nice, but it's your basic cookie cutter, big developer home where they've got 4 or 5 different plans, and they'll change a little bit of the elevation, but they're selling so fast here, just as fast as they can get them built.
Yeah, and Pulte is a big track production builder. They're in multiple markets across the United States. That is a company that is, doing upwards of 4 to 8,000 homes each and every year.
Yeah.
And so they have buying power, you all. And so some of us, custom on the more custom home builder side, meaning we don't have a large production company behind us, it's hard to have that buying power. It's hard to compete. When a company like D.R. Horton, Pulte, Toll Brothers, all of those can buy 88,000 refrigerators all at the same time, they're getting some steep discounts, right? And so that's why you see limited opportunities now. Now, Todd, on that development where on Pulte, what do you think their price of their lots are? Do you know how much
So
is in the
my father-in-law, he's semi-retired now, works for Vertical Earth, and they're a very large land development company, civil engineering. They do a lot of the DOT work now too, but he does a lot. He was doing some neighborhoods before they got some major contracts with the state, but it was about, by the time you bought the land, 120 to 140 grand a lot is what it cost. And they're getting such, and you probably know this, the big builders get rebates. They're able to build. So what I could probably build for 130, they're probably building for 100.
Yeah.
They're getting major discounts from their subs because of the volume, and they're getting major rebates from the large suppliers, whether it be the siding, the heating and air. And the small guys we can't go in and just, we can, but it's very, very risky, and you got to have deep pockets. If you go in and buy, let's say 35 acres, then you hire, by the time you go through the permitting with our county, by the time you were to get sewer and your drain and your water in there and your utilities, it may take you 2 to 3 years, and you just better hope the market hasn't turned. If we do that, and we will one day. There's about 4 of us that do what I do, and we're, back in 2012, 13, 14, you could go in, all the work was done. So these people with money were buying these lots for 5 to 10, 15 grand a lot. Sewer's already there, water meters already paid. It was foreclosed, and they did very, very well. Looking back, if you had the money, that would have been a home run. But if you were to buy raw land today, that's what people ask me. Why don't you do it? It's super risky to me, just because real estate's cyclical, and we're on year 12 or 13 of riding straight up at some point. And it started to level out with these interest rates, but at some point I would think that, things will level out. But right now there's just so much growth in our area, and sounds like yours as well. And just such a shortage of houses and a huge demand that it's stayed steady.
Absolutely. Well, and going back to, the infrastructure costs, he just said by the time they developed those lots, they were about 125, 135,000 a lot. 6, 7, 8 years ago, some of those lots were 16, $20,000. I remember when I could develop a neighborhood, and the cost to develop my putting in the infrastructure, the sewer, the water lines, all of that, utilities, was about 18 grand per lot. Today, that's about $62,000 a lot. And so that's why we see the big increase in these houses, because you just simply can't get it done any cheaper than that.
Yeah.
And without the infrastructure, you have no development to build on, right? And so you have to do those things. And so that's where the correction, I think, needs to come into play, if it ever will. I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Todd?
I, I mean, we're blessed to be this busy. It's great because it's been a good, profitable few years. But at some point, you feel for these, especially these teachers and this affordable. The big thing with City of Cumming, there's a new mayor and there's a lot of development. It's his hot button.
He's a builder.
Affordable housing. So right now, there's not much of it other than what myself and about 4 other of us builders do. So I don't know. It's just what drives here is you can't buy land less than about 75 to 100 grand an acre. So by the time you pull the bulldozers in and pull in the civil utilities and all that, that's why you're at that 100 plus 125,000 per lot and higher. Now we own some commercial property, some apartments, and we're getting ready to annex out of the county for 2 reasons. I won't go into both of them, but I learned a lot about Forsyth County politics. I sat through the hearings and and learned exactly how it works. It's not much different than Washington D.C., but we're going to get into the city because the mayor loves affordable housing. There's not enough of it, so he's going to increase our density, and what we'll do is we'll build some entry level apartments and keep them at a set price for so many years, and in lieu he'll give us a conditional use permit to allow more, because the room's there, but because we're going to have sewer, but there's 6 units per acre. We could easily do 12 because we've got the room. It's just getting that pushed through. So I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of got off on it, but there's just not much out there, and it's at some point I don't know what'll happen, but I think the price of real estate has finally caught up with inflation. Forever I thought real estate was cheap compared to going out and buying a burger or buying a Coke, and now all of a sudden real estate's finally catching up. So it's the rates are 6.5%. At what point can you afford a $600,000 house at 6.5%? So I guess time will tell. Either I think those rates will trickle back down, or prices will level off. But we got to get the inflation, the sub cost and the inflation has to get under control too. So there's so many driving factors that are affecting this.
Yeah, absolutely. And Todd, Keith put in the chat, he said, based upon this info, when clients suggest they want to build their own house, it doesn't seem feasible unless they are extremely wealthy. Is that correct? You know, I'll let you go in a minute, Todd. But here, Keith. They've got to be realistic, okay? They've got to be realistic with what they can afford and what their selections need to be. I think a lot of times that comment may be true because people assume, what's the old saying? They've got a champagne taste on a beer budget,
Yep.
right? Don't you think so too, Todd?
Yeah, and I'm just quickly pulling up a calculator to have in front of it. No, that's exactly right. You can do it. There's absolutely doable. And on the flip side, what a lot of people were doing because they were looking at houses that needed so much work. It may have the old, like in the 90s, the old LP siding, which is the old pin test. If you could take a ballpoint pen and push through it, that siding is, as long as you keep good paint on it. But over time, that's got to be replaced. Polybutylene plumbing, we've got it in some units we're replacing right now, but that's got to be replaced. You got a 10-year-old, 15-year-old air conditioner, that's got to be replaced. So you can factor in, but if that house is 250 grand more to build, is it truly worth doing that? Is it affordable versus buying something fix it over the 5 or 10 years? So if I think, and one of our agents asked me the other day, you think they could build a 4,000 square foot home and be under 500,000? I said, it's just 10 years ago, yes, but today you'll be lucky to be under $1 million. It's just the price of things have gotten out of control. Now, if you, I think there's a way to do it if you know the right contacts, I guess. But it's a lot more that's involved, and most builders are going to want 15 to 20% of the cost, like cost plus, or probably the minimum I see is probably 15%. So if you're at $400,000 on a construction loan, you're basically giving them a nice, very nice pool, or you could have a finished basement, and that's what you're going to be paying your builder. You're going to be paying him 80 to 100 grand to build a house.
Yeah, and things like that. Pools have gone up astronomically in price ever since COVID. Really, I mean, that's when everybody said, "Okay, I need my own pool now," right? And so it's just crazy what those have escalated to. You know, when you're working with your clients, going back to what Keith had suggested and what some of you are probably thinking, look, new construction is not out of the realm, but they've got to be extremely educated to what things do cost. I mean, like me, I've lived in one used home. The rest have all been new construction that we've built because I like things done my way, and I'm willing to pay a little bit more to not have to make a house fit or work for me. But yes, I've got to be realistic on, okay, if I want to be at this number, maybe I'll do that 10 years from now and not today, right? I mean, there's always ways to trim and cut, what makes sense. And also, that's where you all, as real estate professionals, come into handy because look, I work with clients all the time that are like, Stephanie, should we spend the money on this specialty tile, or is an appraiser really going to give me any value for it? Right? I mean, think of how many things are so expensive, and are they really, really worth it? A lot of times, no, because appraisers don't care. You
Yeah.
know?
Trex decking. I've just spent some on that, and it went timber tech. But you're right. There's so many little things. Cabinets. I mean, you could get into a custom home, and you could. And I tell friends that are looking to build, put it in your kitchen, but you got to find somewhere to shave. And if you're going to go out and get custom wood cabinets, now if you're building, your forever home and it's very, very custom, then go for it. But you can get a $10,000 cabinet package where some people might spend 80 and then take that 70 and pay your builder and don't have the headache or put it elsewhere. And then like flooring, if you go site finish versus a nice LVP or engineered floor, this is probably double the cost. So there's so many different ways you can look at different products and still have a nice end unit. You don't want to skimp on air conditioners. You don't want to skimp on shingles. There's certain things that you want to put the best in there, but there's also ways that you can really save yourself 10, 15, $20 per square foot, because it starts adding up very quick.
Absolutely. And if anybody has questions, please do put them in the chat because we want to address those. Keith, did you have a question?
Yeah, the guest he hit on some good points about when you take someone to new construction, they go to the what is it, the model, the model place where you're picking out all the things, and their eyes get big and they start going to, give me that list again about what's critical and what can they skimp on, because they get to the design center and they just
Here's
and they just blow their budget, and you got to bring them back down to earth. So if we get that knowledge, that'll help us
I
out
got
to
a
keep them in line.
a perfect example. I'm working with an older couple, so this whole came from a cold lead. They found me on Zillow. They saw I built houses. I sent them by a few of mine, and they walked through it. But they really wanted. I built cottages with no garages. They really wanted they wanted a bigger home with a 2-car garage. So I'll tell you what, go out and look. And when you're ready to write that contract with that builder, use an agent. I said their model, most of them is built in there, and if not, let's talk about it. But they're going to probably pay between 2 and 3%. And I'll build your next home. And I gave them a little bit of a close. And I do this a lot because my main income is really based on my rental portfolio, my rental properties, and building houses. I don't work with a lot of buyers and sellers. It's not because I don't want to. I just don't have time. But so I met with them. The husband's living in California. The wife's here. And it went back and forth. It was 4 or 5 visits to the site because they got a great lot, but they're building on a little bit of fill. They're having to put in a subwall. I'll explain that in a minute if you don't know what a subwall, but it's a mini one. So she was torn between what to do. I said, well, if I'm building this, here's where we want to put our garage. Here's where we want to do this. So we went to the design meeting, and she had already picked out about everything she wanted. And the things that I wouldn't skip on. One that came up, and the husband just got so frustrated. He had to spend $600 to upgrade the carpet pad, which you don't have to, but when you're already putting in a cheap carpet, go ahead and put in the 8-pound pad. And it was throughout the whole house. I said, you will not regret it. So I know that sounds minuscule, but pay extra to put in a nicer pad because they're going to sell you probably a 25 to 30 ounce carpet. Now, if they have optional upgrades, and go for it. Another big one that a lot of builders don't do it, but if you can pay for it, put a better exterior paint on there because a lot of them use what we call this A100. A lot of builders won't do it, but if the build track builders may not, but if you're working with a smaller builder, they should do it. Go with like a super paint or something even higher than that, because that's the difference between having to paint your house 2 to 3 years versus 7 or 8. It's going to pay. And material wise, I just put cashmere on the inside of my house, and I put Sherwin-Williams second from the top on the exterior, and it's shiny. It washes better when you go to pressure wash it. So exterior paint, carpet pad, cabinets. Again, just depends on the price point. If they offer a couple different selections, you could do that. I saw them charging so much more money to put black hardware in. It doesn't cost them a cent more. It's just a fad. So these builders get creative. What can we do to make more money? And they were charging extra for black doorknobs and black kitchen hardware. You could always put in the regular kitchen hardware and swap it out. But ceiling fans, you want to go ahead and probably have it pre-wired, because if you don't, and it may be $180 a room, but if you don't pre-wire the house for stuff like speakers, stuff like ceiling fans, once you want to add it, if there's not access, they're going to have to start cutting holes, and you're paying a drywall finisher, then you're paying a painter, and hoping they don't, mess anything else up with your floors, because by the time you got to hire all that, it just becomes a mess. So, wiring, anything that you want it pre-wired, go ahead and spend the money on that. What else? Your shingles, I see a lot of, and you probably see this too, Stephanie, where they're building $500,000 houses, and they're putting a 3-tab shingle on. Now, if the whole neighborhood is like that, then you might be stuck with it. But if you have the option to upgrade to a true architectural shingle, every house I build, and when I from 200,000 and up, because we do use a lot of roof trusses, and most big builders do. So those come from a factory. When you do a 3-tab and that sun hits it where those trusses meet, it looks like your shingles can raise up in certain areas. So it just looks bad. And then once you get that house inspected, that thing comes up and they make a big deal out of it. And it's really just cosmetic. So if you could throw it architectural, it might cost you $1,000 more, but in the long run, it's a 30 or forever shingle versus probably a 20, 25 year. Stephanie, do you have anything else? I mean, those are some of the 4 or 5 items. Covered porch. It's much easier to go ahead and add that now. It might cost you 10 grand, but again, by the time you have to, tie it in and pull the siding off and add flashing and add your gutters, there's just so much that goes into construction. If you do it while it's being built, it's going to be a lot less headache and usually be cheaper.
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
about a
Well,
finished
and
basement?
two, things to be cognizant of, like I am a massive raving fan of spray foam. Like
Yeah.
I will pay the extra money to spray foam my house. The house that my husband and I are in now is a lot bigger than what we came from. And we have cheaper utility bills in this house because the entire thing was spray foamed. And I mean,
Yeah.
it was worth the 10 grand that I spent, because I'm sure that in the first 18 months, I'm saving that kind of money.
Yeah, especially the bigger houses. You get in the bigger ones, you don't have to spray foam the whole thing too. If it's too costly, you can do the walls, you can do the attic. I did on Mine's only, when I just finishing up, was 25 feet wide by 30 deep. It's a cottage. It's tiny, but we spray foamed a lot of it. But in the attic, I just ended up doing bats. And I can always, and you can always do it later. But again, if you do it later, you can't do the walls. So you do the walls up front. But then if you do the attic, you got to suck out the old. And so there's cost of removing insulation and blowing it back in. So spray foam is definitely a good option. It's come down in price a lot too, because there's a lot more people doing it.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Based upon your comments, someone talking about getting a finished basement from the builder versus doing it themselves, sounds like the suggestion would be let the builder do it rather than you trying to go back in and back end it.
It just depends. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Well, I was going to say it's budget, right? Can they afford to finish the basement? If they can, then I would say absolutely, because that is your cheapest price per square foot is the basement.
Usually less than half of what, probably $40 a square foot versus 120 for ground up. Or it used to be, rule of thumb was a little less than half.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some builders, if it gets, things slow down, they start throwing in free basements. When they say that, at least in the past, it was just, they're not going to finish it, but you'll get a basement foundation home, and they're going to say they're not going to, charge you that premium for it. That was pretty popular back when things slowed down.
Got it. Appreciate it.
But think like back to the basement. If you think ahead, if you know you're going to do it, and they give you the option to go ahead and you want to make sure your ceilings are high enough, so you're not having to have drop ceilings and they're too low. We always do 9-foot basements. You can go higher, but a lot of builders may do an 8-foot. And then if you don't have the trusses to run the ductwork through it, it's just conversations. You really, in construction, you got to really think ahead. And even me doing this, and I've probably built 60 homes in the past 4 years, and I still miss things because you just constantly trying to think ahead. What can I do to make sure I don't have a issue or miss something down the road? So it's with basement, anything that you think you might want down there, when they go to frame it up, you want to make sure it can fit what you need in the future. And mini splits are very big too now. So if it's not a huge basement, you can add what we call a mini split, and that's going to be a little cheaper, and that should heat and cool the basement as well.
Got it. Thanks. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And don't forget, if anybody has any questions, put them in the chat. Todd, let's talk about development. Let's kind of swing to development. How do you know that a piece of land is ripe for development?
Sorry, I had to decline that call. Really, you go walk it. I mean, in our county, there's a lot of farmland that's getting bought up and developed. Now they have this rule of thumb, or this law. It's called it. So they make you do 20 or 25% green space, and developers are smart. So, and I'm sure it's in the same area as you are. They'll take the 80% of the great land, and that's where the houses go. The swamp land, the creek land, the stuff that's not developable. Though that becomes the green space. The rule was written for that to be kind of like green space, nature trail, green space, hiking trail, for it to be used. But a lot of it's the junk land that they can't get anything on because it's not profitable. But you got to run out and you got to do perk tests, the civil engineering. There's a lot of costs that you got to spend up front, and you may after you spend 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 grand, you may turn around and walk away from it, just knowing that it's going to, number one, you're going to be over budget. Number two, just not suitable to handle the amount of units you need to make it a worthwhile project. We do it on a small scale. I'll go out and spend $1,000 on soils test and possibly a survey, just to find out, after turning into my surveyor and him drawing it out, and that's another $500, that it will not work. It won't support a 2-bedroom. It only support a 1-bedroom, and that 1-bedroom is going to be a very expensive septic system. So it's no different on the big scale of things, where they'll go out and D.R. Horton has, and we've got a couple big contractors like Reed and Reed. There's several big ones that'll come in and they'll do the site development, and then turn around once the civil engineers and the utilities are in, they turn around and buy it. But I guess if we're talking about large projects versus small, I do more of the small ones, but I'm familiar with the large ones through my father-in-law, and just, I've watched 2 neighborhoods across the street from my house from when they started grading. I took my kids, and I got a 6-year-old, and we crawled through the sewer pipes and just watched the whole process. And then you learn real quick why is it so expensive to develop? Well, it took them a year from when they put that bulldozer on site to get the sewer and get the green taps coming out of the ground, get the roads in, and then they got to go get the permits. If you're looking at, and I don't know if anybody wants to talk about this or get into it, let's say you sell a house, and you've got, and a buddy of mine just did this. He sold a rental property, and the client had a mobile home to sell. So he bought 2 lots and he's developing them. He's building 2 little houses he's going to build from the ground up and sell them. But there's issues where, you know, in our county, if you got agricultural property, it's got to have 150 foot of road frontage per house, or you got to get it rezoned. So I know I've kind of bounced around, but the number one, the property's got to be able to be rezoned to be, you know, R3, R4. Number two, you ideally don't want a ton of water on it, because when you got water, you've got 75 foot, 100 foot setbacks. And then you've got, you know, issues with sewer. You can work around that, but it still proposes additional cost.
Yeah.
And then the topo.
Well, and what Todd is listing off there is exactly his ordinances and his zoning restrictions for his area. And that's one of the first things, you know, if you want to be a real estate specialist when it comes to land development, new construction, it's to know all of those things. I get agents all the time that'll call me up and say, Stephanie, I've got 5 acres in Shelby County that's ripe for development. And I go, where's the closest sewer? Oh, well, there's no sewer. Well, in Shelby County, I know that you have to, in order to have septic, 5 acre tracts. So it's not developable. You see, so part of being great at this is to know your local markets ordinances when it comes to those things.
Yeah. And I think there was a question that popped up at the end, and that
Oh,
goes
yeah.
back to what you just said. I think number one, before you approach a builder, go out and find the county, if it's multiple counties, and go out and educate yourself. Go meet, and like in Forsyth County, there's a planner of the day. They'll gladly sit down with you and talk to you about a piece of property. Say, I'm looking at this piece of property. I think I can do this, but I'm not sure. Would you schedule an hour meeting with me? And they'll do it. You schedule it out a couple of days in advance, but know the zoning laws, and they change. There was something and I could tell this story if you'd like, but the planning and zoning tried to make a big change in this county, and about 40 of us got together immediately. And me and one other Rex, the other guy I was telling you about, I was the main contact with Carly, and they were saying that we do a lot of what we call VCR. It was at one point vacation cottage rental, where they had these 0.11 and 0.12 acre lots zoned back in the 60s, where you could build 600 and 700 foot lake cottages. Well, now there's still lots around that size, but in 06, the state of Georgia, and I'm sure Kentucky's the same, when you had septic, you got to have your primary septic field. That's where your septic lines go in the ground. Then you got to have reserve, which is secondary. So if that system were to fail 5, 10, 15 years from now, you got to have the replacement, and that replacement's got to be 25% bigger than your primary. Doesn't really make sense. It should be equivalent.
Right.
But it's always got to be bigger. And if it does fail, they're just going to add on to what's there. But you got to show a footprint that is going to fit. So the county tried to say, well, we'll let you build on those lots, but as soon as you combine 2 or 3 of them to make it from 0.11 to 0.4 or 0.5, if it's not over 0.6 of an acre, which is the new code for anything with septic, they become unbuildable. You can't do it. So you're going to make me take a 0.11 and squeeze a minimum square foot, 1,200 square feet. You can't do it. You can, but it's not profitable. But I want to add this neighbor's lot, and I want to make it actually double. They said no. So we raised Cain, and we requested a meeting. We got our attorney on the phone, and within a couple of days they reversed their decision. But you're just dealing with, they're not out in the field. They don't know. But back to that question, if you're going to approach a builder, I would definitely know the market and then know the county and state regulations. The more knowledge you have, the more impressed they're going to be. And then, just show them your portfolio. I list my own homes, but recently I've started to let my wife and her friend, which we're a husband and wife domestic team. So it still rolls up to my group. But there is benefit for builders, if I was busier, to have a go-to agent that did a really good job that could list those homes. So I wouldn't have to, deal with it.
Well, and I think, attaching onto that, Michael, one of the things that I like to see is somebody that understands the construction process, right? If you're walking into a house that's under construction and it's just at drywall stage and, it's a 4,500 square foot home, to simply walk in and say, can you have this done next month? I mean, common sense says absolutely not. And so just some sort of, understanding of the construction process, right? Learn the lingo, learn the terms, learn what certain moldings are called, what certain ceilings are called. Builders like experienced agents that they don't feel like they're having to do your job. The worst thing is that when you're a builder and you've got to pay a commission, but that agent couldn't explain the first thing about anything in that property. What did they pay you for, right? Show them why they should be paying you. Let's see. John says, I'm seeing a lot of communities pop up that are being developed for rentals. How much are you seeing of that? Are you seeing any of that down in Georgia?
Not in our county. There was one, and then there was some pushback from the community. It's very big. My brother's in commercial real estate out in Oregon, and they're constantly looking for land across the U.S. where their company can build a rental portfolio. But it is prevalent around Metro Atlanta. I think they're just looking at long-term, fixed income coming in because the rents have skyrocketed. Just with the house prices, the houses have skyrocketed. So have rents. I mean, you're looking at like I sold a couple to an investor at the end of the year. We just kind of let them go because I needed to prepare for 2024 and they weren't the best lots, but it was a $300,000 house and it'll rent for $2,200 a month. So if you had, if you go bigger, if you get a 4-bedroom on sewer in a neighborhood with amenities, you're probably pushing $3,000 a month. And if you've got 50 of those, they're looking at, okay, I'm gonna, I know what the return on investment. So it is still pretty common. I just think in our county they put a stop to it, but it is common around Metro Atlanta.
Perfect. All right, Michael has a question. What do you want to hear as a builder from a realtor if they were to bring you a possible piece of land for possible development?
Yeah, of course, number one would be, no price. But no, a lot of times agents will list property, and this is frustrating part, even small lands, it's out of their hand because it's a seller, but they need to have things in place if they have a survey, soil test. If not, it's just gonna prolong the sale of that property. Because if you're gonna go list a lot and you don't know if it perks, then you're gonna be dealing with a lot of questions. You're gonna be dealing with a lot of buyers that are going to get it under contract and then back out because they don't want to spend the money. And if they do, they're going to have to wait weeks to get it done. So the more that seller or the agent brings, the more info you can dig in, and you can even go to the courthouse, or in our county, you can go online and search the deed records. You can pull the legal description. You can make sure there's no encroachments. There's a lot of issues with encroachments. I'm trying to buy a lot right now, and the neighbor built a shed across, and it's not just 10 feet, it's like 30. So I'm like, the seller's an out-of-state seller, so he's never going to sell this if we don't approach the neighbor and get some of these legal issues fixed. So the more, just the more info you can get from that seller, and they may not have anything. Well, that at the end of the day, they're probably going to take a little less money when they go to sell it. And if you can spend a little bit up front, just like fixing up a house, it's no different when you go to list land and go to look at land. You'll see large tracts, and I'm sure it's very similar across the U.S. that goes on the market in 2 months, it's under contract. It may not close for 18 months because they're going through a full rezoning process, and you're dealing with the county, and then the county will come back with comments, and it may go to a public hearing. If it goes to a public hearing, then that they get a shot for the community to speak. If the community pushes back, it goes back to the commissioners. It can draw out for a very, very long time, and then the politics gets involved, and it's just the more they have up front, it's going to save them a big headache.
Absolutely. Well, and here's a great example. An agent sent me a piece of land over in Indiana. He sent me the Google imagery of the land and said, Stephanie, you should look at this for your next development. I emailed back and I said, please send me the survey. Please send me the utilities that are present. Please send me what sewer capacity is. And I mean, I had a whole list of questions. He wrote back and he said, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh boy.
I mean, that's when he's not doing his seller. I mean, he shouldn't even be representing the property, right, you all? Here's the thing. If you have an opportunity, the seller needs to survey that parcel, number one. Number two, reach out to a title company and run preliminary title. Number two, that's your job. You can get it done for free. If your title company's charging you then you get a new title company. Get a preliminary, because one, you need to understand the easements that are going across that property, right? I mean, think about that, Todd. How often have you looked at a piece of property and all of a sudden right up the middle is a gas line?
Power.
You are not moving a gas line, guys, right? Or telecommunications or anything. Back in the day, to get from point A to point B, city to city, they ran that stuff through something, and it's called rural America, right? And so preliminary title is going to show you that. The survey is going to show you that. If your seller says, I'm not going to spend the money on a survey, well, then guess what? Tell them they're going to get a low ball offer.
Yeah.
Because nobody's going to buy it without a survey. And they must not care about price at that point, because who the heck is going to pay the money? A lot of times my surveys that I have to have done cost $6,000. Do you think I want to do that hypothetically? I'd rather the seller provide it to me. And I think if they want to sell their land, they should do that. It should be a condition of it. So there's a lot of things like that that you need to make sure that you're educated on. And here's the thing. Land deals can be absolutely fun, but like Todd said, they're going to take a lot of time if they've got to go through subdivision hearings or a lot of due diligence or even public hearings and zoning and all of those things. It can take a ton of time. Half of something is better than nothing of nothing. If you don't feel you're equipped to represent a listing like that, find somebody in your market that is, so that you can make sure that you walk it through. Because land development's what I've done for 25 years. And it didn't take, I wasn't born with it. I learned over time. And you know how I learned? By making horrible mistakes and sitting on property and not knowing what the heck I was doing. So, don't be that person either. Sorry, I got off on that tangent.
Oh, yeah.
I get passionate about it because I want everyone in our industry to just be an amazing, stellar, individual and impress people, right? And it's crazy how many calls, and I'm sure this happens to you, Todd, too, because you're known for it. We get solicited all the time and nobody is bringing us anything of value. And it's unfortunate sometimes. So let's change all that. That's why we're doing these trainings on Monday. We're going to be the first class of real estate professionals across the country because we're sharing with everybody every single week. All right. Michael says, Melvin, in California, the laws have changed where an owner can convert their garage to an apartment called ADU. Do you build those in your market? And if so, what is the cost per square foot to build? Melvin, we have no idea. I don't think, is that happening in Georgia?
Not that I know of. Maybe in Atlanta. I'm in the suburbs kind of, so not as common.
But Melvin, if I want a Toto toilet or versus a, what's a generic toilet, Todd? The cost per square foot's going to change, right?
Yeah, the ADU is an accessory dwelling unit because we have a homeless issue in California. So there's zoning is you don't normally you would have to have a certain number of parking spaces, but we don't have to have that. And you can convert your garage into living quarters. So and normally it's somewhere around 300, 400 square foot apartment, single or one bedroom. So I was just wondering, are we the only state that have that? So, and if you guys did it, what would it cost?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know of any other states that are doing that, but I'm sure there
Long
are
Island's doing
anywhere
it.
where there's housing shortages.
It's very common in Long Island.
Yeah, I'd say
Very
it's
common in Long Island.
in the cities.
Sorry, I
and
didn't
then
jump in. Sorry.
it probably would be too expensive. The main thing you got to, if it's on a slab, you're gonna have to get concrete involved and have to bore in and tie into the sewer line. It sounds, I mean, most of this would be on sewer. If you get into septic, it's a whole nother ball game. And I was buying a lake, a dock off a gentleman, and he wanted to take his garage and put his office, and then he wanted to put a bathroom in there. And I'm like, well, you're already on 3/4 of an acre. You don't have first thing you got to do is get a survey. I said, I don't know, unless you can tie into your existing septic, you're probably not going to have room to just drop a new 1-bedroom septic in because there's no footprint. So being on sewer, it's going to be a little bit easier, but you're going to get into concrete work and get into plumbing. But at the end of the day, if it's only 400 square feet, it's really, I'll make sure, who you know and who you hire. Cause there's a lot of subs that'll charge way too much and just take advantage of people too.
Well,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people that would consider that a small job and charge extra just because it is so small,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
No, thanks for bringing that up. Any other questions? This has been extremely, thanks, Todd, for all your knowledge today.
Well, hopefully I was helpful. And if anybody, I can give you my personal info, but if if you ever wanted to get in and buy a lot and try to build one of these, I mean, around this area, I could help you obviously, but it is, once you do one, it's kind of like a fix and flip. Once you do a couple of those and you do well, it becomes kind of exciting and you're like, let's try to do another. So we got out of, I think it's easier to build a house from the ground up because you know your cost, you know what problems you're going to run into. Those problems are always discovered up front, usually with the land. If you got an issue, I'm cutting into a hill, I'm gonna have to do a drive under garage, or I'm having to force a slab on a basement or vice versa. When you get into remodels, you just don't know how much mold's behind that wall. You don't know there was a roof leak. You don't know there was a pest issue. You do, but after the inspection, but you've already committed to buying it, but you may uncover additional, like the house I'm in right now, we had to suck out all the insulation. Then we got into the drywall. We knew we had a little bit of mold, but instead of going up 2 feet, we removed every piece in the basement, just redid it because I was going to be staying here some. And if I remodel something, I want to make sure I do it the right way and not cut corners. So I think ground up construction, it is difficult, but if you got a way to do it and you've got any interest, it's a lot of fun.
Good deal. Good deal. Michael, your comment, can you do owner financing? I don't know any builder that does it. I'm sure there is one, but I haven't seen it in our market. That's for sure.
I haven't. It used to be common back in the 90s a lot. I haven't seen it, and it may come back. Just all depends. Right now, they're just so easy and profitable to sell. So most builders are selling them just as quickly as they can build them.
Absolutely.
Stephanie, as soon as you say you'll do it, you're going to have a lot of people applying to live in breakers.
No, I will never do These homes are way too expensive for us to hang on to forever. No, not happening. I'd have to charge $30,000 a month in rent.
Property management is a whole nother, you should almost become a property manager at that point if you're owner financing because you still have ownership. Another headache.
That's right. That is right. Well, this was awesome today. If anybody, John, what do we have next Monday to look forward to?
Next Monday, I can't remember what we have on next Monday. I didn't have it pulled up. We will get a message out to everybody about what we've got going on next Monday.
Oh, there we go. Julie got it.
Julie got it?
Put it in. Julie put it in.
Okay, Julie's got it loaded.
Grow your production business with commercial referrals. So this is, look, this is something that we get asked all the time is, oh, I have a commercial opportunity. I have, and again, commercial real estate is its own animal. And so next week we're going to talk about, when is it a deal that you should be trying, or when is it a deal that you should be referring? Right. And we're going to walk you through those processes. We're also going to go over some commercial platforms that you can get some information off of so that when you do run into that transaction, you'll have the information to do it properly. So that's next Monday.
That's going to be great.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much today. We'll see you next Monday.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank y'all. Pleasure. Well, have a great.
Great.
All righty. Take care.
Bye all.
Bye.